December is here, and what are we expecting this month? We're going to be taking a look at the weather patterns from now through Christmas, and we'll also take a look at the night sky. What can you see when you look up late into the night hours? I'm 5 News Chief Meteorologist Matt Standards. We're getting to the coldest time of the year, but we want to start with the jet stream because the jet stream is the main driver of our weather patterns, especially when we get to the winter time, because it separates the coldest air from the warmest air. And a lot of times you've got two jet streams. You've got a polar jet and a subtropical jet, but they come together in order to drive weather systems from the Pacific coast to the Atlantic coast. And overall, for the month of December, this December for 2022, we're probably going to notice a dip in the west and then more of a zonal pattern across the central U.S. and into the Great Lakes and mid-Atlantic. What this means is that we're going to have big cold spells, probably along the Pacific coast, and then even colder air up towards Canada. But once in a while, some of these cold systems will start to dive south across the Great Lakes. Notice how the jet stream slowly kind of goes south just a little bit once you get past Kansas City and towards Indianapolis. That means we're probably going to get some quick cold air intrusions across the Corn Belt and into the southern Great Lakes. And what that means is we may have a little bit more of an active pattern from the Ohio River Valley and then a more active pattern across the west. Now, in the middle, where you kind of have that little bump in the jet stream, we may have some drier conditions right along the Front Range and into parts of West Texas. But the jet stream is really what drives the weather, and when that thing moves north and south, it really changes whether you're getting the cold air or the warm air. But it looks like because we have such a zonal pattern and not as many fluctuations that we may get more towards January and February, it's really just going to be the coldest air is in the north, warmest air towards the south. You think, Matt, that's always the case. Yeah, but it's probably going to be more exaggerated this time because we're not getting those swings. So the north is just going to stay cold. We're not going to see too many bumps that really try to warm up the north. So we're just going to stay cold and we're just going to stay warm towards the south. We'll get some fronts that try to approach. We'll probably get that cold air getting as far south as Arkansas and Oklahoma, but it's going to be harder for those cold fronts to get really past the Red River and then into Texas and then closer to the Gulf Coast. Sometimes they may make it, but a lot of times they may not. A lot of times they'll probably kind of stick right here. So anywhere north of Arkansas, north of Tennessee, and north of North Carolina, that's where the coldest air is really going to continue to hit and then probably stay. But definitely a lot colder towards the north because we're not expecting the warm fronts to really make it anywhere near the north. Too many cold fronts are on the way coming in from Canada. And we've also noticed towards the west and western Canada too, this is a side note, we've got a lot of snowpack, a little bit more snowpack than normal, which is good. Now, in eastern Canada, we don't have enough snowpack. It's less than normal. So that's kind of made things a little bit lopsided, but it's going to help drive these cold fronts over and over again. And that's going to lead to different precipitation chances across the U.S. So with these cold fronts really diving in and you got that jet stream coming in, not only is it the wettest time of the year in the west, but it's likely to be even wetter than normal. That's great news for the drought across the western states in the U.S. But then notice this drier pocket right across the central U.S. and into parts of the desert Southwest too, from West Texas into New Mexico. That's mainly due to, remember that bump in the jet stream? We're probably not going to get a lot of activity. We'll get these fronts coming in, but things just look drier overall, so we're not going to be able to tap into moisture to change them over into rain. But you head just a little bit farther east, there probably will be just enough of a southerly flow from the Gulf of Mexico in order to produce some wet weather there across the Ohio River Valley and then south into parts of the Mississippi River Valley as well. So parts of eastern Arkansas, east into Nashville, north into Louisville, Kentucky will probably have wetter than normal conditions. And it's already normally dry this time of year in Florida, but expected to be even drier. So that's good news for those trying to vacation, try to escape the cold air and head south towards the Sunshine State. All right, so in December, let's talk about what we normally get now. So overall for Arkansas, we're kind of talking about an average December. We're going to have kind of a lot of cold fronts coming in, a lot of warm fronts, but they're not going to be crazy intense. So we'll drop, when the cold front comes in, we'll drop temperatures by about 10-15 degrees, and warm front comes in, we'll go by up another 10-15 degrees. But we're not expecting the huge swings throughout the month of December, at least for the first half of December. Maybe towards the second half, as you get closer to January, some of those swings will get a little bit more extreme. But what do we normally get? Across northwest Arkansas, generally December is stuck in the 40s, mid-40s for many of us. We get about 3 inches, just shy of the 3-inch mark. In the River Valley, we get a little bit more. The closer you are to the Gulf of Mexico during the wintertime, you usually are able to get a little bit more water. So that's why you see the change in how much rainfall we get. In the River Valley, generally throughout the month, of December, we're in the low 50s. So we're going to have a lot of 40s and 50s, I think, this month. There may be a few more 50s, though, than 40s overall for the natural state and eastern Oklahoma. On top of that, we are losing more daylight, but not so much. December is the final month that we lose daylight, and we only lose it until the winter solstice, December 21st. After that, we start gaining it back. And for these last 3 weeks or so that we're losing daylight in December, it's not going to be a whole heck of a lot. In fact, these numbers show you the least amount of daylight that you're going to lose. We'll at least lose 4 minutes in southern Florida, but across many of the southern states, we'll lose at least 6 minutes. These aren't drastic changes. What you're getting in the beginning of December is generally going to be the same kind of night and day that you get at the end of December. December's kind of right at the tail end of all the losses. We kind of bottom out here, and the only way to go is up in terms of more daylight as we go into 2023. We're going to lose at least 8 minutes across Fort Smith and Fayetteville throughout much of Arkansas, north of the Arkansas River and along the Arkansas River. And then once you get farther north, we're going to lose at least 10 minutes across much of the Great Lakes. And then closer to the U.S.-Canadian border, we lose at least 12 minutes. But if you remember, more towards October and November, a lot of times we're losing an hour or so. So this is just minuscule. We're not going to lose a lot in December. We're going to start gaining it by the end of the month. So we lose a little bit and then we gain some. So you're kind of right in the middle. There's not going to be a huge change overall from beginning to end. Specifically for western Arkansas, we're going to be losing about 8 minutes of daylight. Technically in Fayetteville, 8 minutes and 16 seconds. You can see the sunrise changes across the time span of the month. We'll have the sunrise just after 7 o'clock at the beginning of the month, but by the end of the month, it'll be a little bit different. We'll have to wait a little bit longer for sunrises, closer to 7:30, 7:27. For sunset, though, check this out. Super early sunset at the beginning of December, but things start to shift by the end of the month. We're going to start having a little bit later of a sunset. You'll notice that a bit right after Christmas. 5:12, that's when the sunset will be by December 31st, the final day of 2022. All right, so that's taking a look at the weather. Of course, a lot of swings take place area-wide, even across the whole country, across the whole North American continent, and then into Asia and Europe. Generally, throughout the winter months, as we get into December and then eventually January and February, we get these colder outbreaks coming in from the Arctic, and you've got these warm fronts that are trying to lift, and you start battling it out, and so that's why you get so many swings. But let's talk about the night sky. What can you expect? Well, we've got the full moon. Of course, you got a full moon every month, but the full moon coming up for December will be December 7th, and it's the full cold moon. The Mohawk Indians coined this term. Of course, it's turning really cold by this time of year. We're already done with the harvest moon and the beaver moon. A lot of the animals are now ready to go for the winter months because it is downright cold, and then it's going to get even colder as we go through January and into early February. Those are really the coldest times of the year generally across the United States. On top of that, we got the Geminids, the meteor shower coming up mid-December. It's going to peak on the 14th. Now, what's kind of fascinating about this one is that we'll have about 120 shooting stars possible per hour. You're not going to see every single one of them, but that's the max rate. That is really high. In fact, the Geminids are considered to be one of the best meteor showers that we have all year long. The problem is the timing. Who wants to stay up in the middle of the night in December? It's usually pretty cold. And a lot of times you can get some clouds too, because we have so many fronts that try to produce the clouds. So a lot of times it's not easy to see, but if it's warm enough for your own comfort and we've got clear skies, you should see a lot of shooting stars. Technically, the meteor shower has already started from about December 1st all the way to about Christmas, December 24th, 25th. That's when it starts to shut off, but the peak will be the 14th. But many shooting stars are likely across the sky in the month of December. But where should you look? Overall, if you look at the night sky right after sunset, so we're talking 6, 7, 8 o'clock, look directly east, and that's when you're going to see the meteor shower. That's where the radiant is on the radiant is generally where the meteor showers look like they're coming from, the shooting stars where they look like they're coming from. And we're going to notice that in the eastern sky right after sunset. But then throughout the night, over time, you're going to see the Gemini constellation move up in the sky. By about midnight, it's going to be directly above your head. And then right before sunrise, it's going to be in the western sky. So it's doing a kind of a big old loop around the night sky, but right at midnight, it's going to be right above you. So generally, if you just look up, you should be able to see. Of course, try to get out of the city lights and try to get an area where you can see the horizon a little bit better. You don't want to be trapped in the forest or your view is just kind of blocked. You want to have as much of an open sky as possible. But you see the peak there coming up December 14th, 120 meteors per hour. Lots of shooting stars, lots of wishes to be made. Middle of December, right before Christmas.